in fact what we are saying. We want to get everybody out to vote today. Glad to hear from so many of you. You two come a little closer to me so we can get you on screen. We are in studio, two very special guests, and I can already tell you right now that this is, we're going to have to probably follow this up, because when we were scheduling this, I didn't really let folk know how in-depth this topic is and the amount of attention that it actually warrants and deserves. And so we've got a couple of very special guests here with us in studio, and also on the phone with us as well. I told y'all about the great panel discussion and workshop and breakout session I attended at the Women's Convention on confronting white womanhood. And we talk about viral in the sense of what's online and what's on the internet. But it went viral at the convention because they had to, physically viral, like in real life, because you had to turn people away. Yep. And you had to have a second one on Sunday?
The next day.
The next Saturday.
Yeah.
And it was like, I heard it was like 800 people at that one. So we want to hear about that. Our guests today in studio, Sophie Ellman-Golan. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Golan.
All right. Good to see you, Sophie.
Nice to see you.
Always a pleasure to see you. And also in studio with us, Heather Marie Scholl.
Yep.
How are you, Heather?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine. Good. Glad to see you as well. And on the line with us, one of the organizers of the Women's March in Ohio, Rhiannon Childs. Rhiannon, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Am I pronouncing your first name correctly?
Yes.
Wonderful. Glad you were able to join us from Ohio as well. So, Sophie, let's start with you, because you kind of gave a powerful opening to the whole conversation when we were in Detroit at the Women's Convention. Tell us about this panel and how it really came about and what its mission really was.
So the panel came about it started about a year ago when Officer Betty Shelby was acquitted for killing Terrence Crutcher. And Heather and I kind of knew each other through the New York City activist world and wound up connecting out of an urge to have a larger conversation, particularly with white women in the beginning, to discuss the very real ways that we see white women's fear of black men as quote unquote reasonable, which is what the jury deemed her fear of her life also as reasonable. And we had kind of a lot of larger discussions about that, which led to sort of the development of this workshop. But the way I open the panel is to really place it in the broader context of from Emmett Till,
You did.
tortured and murdered because a white woman claimed he winked at her, to Dylan Roof, who killed, 9 people in a church in Charleston, all the more painful right now after what happened this weekend. But he, one of his reasons for it was that he said they're raping our women. To then this officer who is armed and shoots an unarmed black man because she says she feels feared for her life.
Yeah. Heather, you were part of this. You kind of work in this area, don't you?
Yeah, so I'm a fine artist, and my main project is called White Work, and it explores white women's roles in the establishment and maintenance of white supremacy. So I've been working on this for a while, and that is part of how me and Sophie connected. And I had wanted to do a workshop around this topic. I didn't want it just to be fine art pieces, but I was also conscious of not just being the voice in a room.
Yeah.
And so it felt really good when I connected with Sophie and we were able to pair together to address this.
Rhiannon joins us from Ohio. Rhiannon, you, as a matter of fact, being a woman of color as a part of this, what did you think about this panel and the necessity for it? Because there was a lot of conversation leading up to the Women's Convention. We talked to some African-American women about being left out of the conversation when it comes to feminism, feeling left out. The feminism was for white women only and black women need not apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, initially I was very reluctant to participate in the panel for those very same reasons. And it wasn't because I didn't feel that this conversation was necessary, but I didn't want to place myself in an uncomfortable or vulnerable situation where I was the only black woman or person of color in the room
Right.
to be, questioned by white women who weren't really willing or open to face ways they have caused harm to, black people. But I trusted Sophie and Heather, and that they were, be supportive of me, and in case I was uncomfortable in that space. But I really liked the way the training session was structured and how we shared stories, and I really felt compelled to join the discussion.
Sophie, what do you think we learned from the conversation?
Well, I think my primary takeaway honestly first began when I arrived in the room and saw how many people were there. I really did not think that many people were going to come to this session. I felt it was important, we all felt it was important, as Rhiannon said, that we have this discussion. But I did not think that a lot of white women were going to actually be willing to have it. And so in many ways, I feel very hopeful afterwards. There's an enormous amount of work to do, of course, but it's nice to see how many people seem to be willing to do it.
What about you, Heather? Because you both did, but particularly you, I noticed there were breakout sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just say, just to kind of paint the picture even more so, it was a lot of emotion.
Yeah, it was.
In this, wasn't there? Women really talking about their experiences. And it was, I'm not quite sure what emotion I was feeling as the only black man in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, it was I don't even know the word for it. It was almost, I've just never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I hadn't either, honestly.
What were you finding as you were going through some of the different groups and some of the sharing that women were doing, Heather?
I was really impressed with the vulnerability that people
Right,
got, and
right.
the way that folks were sharing stories and supporting each other and challenging each other. It wasn't just, let me share this awful thing that I experienced or that I did, but we're going to push each other to see where we could do better in the future and think about things in a new way. And that's what I tried to do when I did interject in groups, is really help women see things from a different perspective, and kind of come outside of a normal way of seeing things. But overall, I was just really impressed with everyone. And there was a moment where I stepped aside with Sophie, and we just felt like proud mothers, seeing all of this unfold, because I really didn't expect people to go that deep. I hope that folks would have a conversation, but I am used to white liberals in particular intellectualizing race. So I didn't have that high of hopes, honestly.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised.
And you didn't see as much intellectualizing of race?
Not in the first session. It's harder for me to gauge the second session because there was so many people.
There's a lot of people.
And there was some people that reported back that they had more of an intellectual discussion than an emotional one.
I see.
But at least in the first session, it really felt personal.
Yeah. I had a colleague of mine, Jennifer Daniels, who was there, who there was something going on outside. People were trying to get in and they couldn't. And this one woman was literally banging on the door.
I missed that.
And then there was a whole conversation that ensued outside. This is the first session. About, well, wait a minute. Is it white privilege for us to be banging on the door trying to get in? So, Rhiannon, what was your take? How did you feel about some of the workshops and the sessions, or the breakout groups? Do you feel that as a black woman, the right message got out, that it was inclusive, as Heather said, that it was less intellectualism and more engagement?
Yes, I do. I felt that a lot of women were being vulnerable and opening themselves up, and I felt that this was a very encouraging for me, that this was the most popular session during the convention. So, I mean, these discussions are necessary, and these white women who were involved need to take these discussions back to their family members and coworkers and other white folks, and not continue to remain silent. because being silent is complicit to, white supremacy. So, I was very happy to see that they were participating and engaged.
Yeah, I must say, so when I was speaking unexpectedly and unsolicitedly at the luncheon, because Tamika, they said, "You going to speak?" I said, "No, I don't speak at women's conventions." Brittany, you all who you haven't had much of a chance to meet, my producer, she's the resident feminist, the only one more feminist than me, but in the room. Well, I don't know, Andrew's close. He's pretty close to it. That's a whole, we'll tell you about that. But so I'm speaking, and I thanked all the white women. So because of the conversation we'd had the day before. So when everybody saw the video of me speaking, and they see me say, "I just want to thank all the white women in the room," everybody got scared. Why did you say that? How can you talk to them that way? But it was because of, I had to explain what was the experience from the day before. What we heard, Sophie, even from you, women telling stories of privilege, possibly stories of when they even profiled black men like me. We got a lot of that in just what was shared from some of the breakout sessions, didn't we?
Yeah, people, I think one of the things that we tried to do, all three of us, was really to get vulnerable ourselves.
Yeah.
And in that sense, create a space where people then felt they could do the same. And doing that means often sharing really personal information and even things we might not be the most proud of.
Yeah.
Not our finest moments or moments that felt really painful for us. And in doing so, I think encouraging others to dig deep within themselves.
And Heather, what do you think people learn from this or can take away from the experience they had with this session? As white women dealing with privilege, and use your words, dealing with their role in white supremacy, because that's a big deal. We can focus a lot on feminism. We know when we say white supremacy, 99% of that is white male supremacy. We just often leave the male out. But as you alluded to, we all, any one of us, any historically oppressed group can assimilate. Black folk, Tom, and assimilate into white supremacy. But what do you think that the women who participated in this got out of it, and what do you anticipate they'll do going forward from this experience?
I mean, I hope that they see their role as part of the bigger picture. I mean, we do focus on white men's roles, but for this system to have created, we had to play our part. Like, it was very necessary for us to play our part. So hopefully there's some understanding and some personal insight as to how that exists within us. And with that insight, a desire to grow. I mean, I know that in one session, people didn't dismantle their own internal white supremacy, but hopefully it brings enough awareness that they can move forward and pursue other information and connections with folks of color in particular.
Rhiannon, black women have asked me and contacted me and said, "What are you doing at a white women's convention? Was it about black women? Was it inclusive? Mark, you sold out to white women." But I have said to all of them that it was very inclusive for any number of reasons. First of all, I go to black folk conventions. I go to all conventions. And most conventions we go to, we end up socializing. Everybody there was working. It wasn't just folks hanging out, socializing, rubbing elbows. You go to a lot of conventions, all we do is exchange business cards. But people came there and actually put work in. And I think there was a lot of sincerity in addressing some of the issues we talk about, and especially this one that we're talking about right now, Rhiannon, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yes, because, white women came to listen to women of color.
Yeah.
And, yes, and that was, very, very important. So I feel that they were there to learn and that it was inclusive in that manner. So, yeah, I agree that they were very, inclusive.
We, folks, unfortunately, we don't have time today. This is, as you said, this was one session.
This was one session.
This is only going to be one session on the radio, because I want to do this again and set aside a significant part of the show for us to have a full-fledged discussion on this issue. And I've said to the women's convention organizers, this could be its own convention. Obviously, because it was the most popular panel at the convention. It was packed. For 2 days. It was only a panel that they had to add a second day to. So I know you all plan to follow up, and you all take this show on the road too. I mean, this ought to be regional conventions where you have these type of conversations, don't you think?
Yeah, we do have plans to continue, and we're working on the next one for here in New York right now.
Really?
Yes, we are.
Well, maybe that's the one we'll just come to and broadcast, maybe.
Maybe.
Or do something like that.
Yeah.
Heather Marie Scholl, Sophie Ellman-Golan, Rhiannon Childs. We're going to take a break on the radio. Those of you watching on social media, stay tuned, because before we go, I'm going to let these ladies let you know where to find them on social media and on websites. So stay tuned. For those of you on the radio, we'll be right back. This is MIP. Where can everybody find you, Heather? You go first.
On Twitter, you can find me at HMS_the artist, or Instagram, Heather Marie Scholl. I also run a podcast with my partner called Too Spicy.
Too Spicy.
Too Spicy
All right.
on iTunes.
And Sophie, how about you? Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at EG Sophie.
EG Sophie. Rhiannon, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Ohio Women's March.
Great. Okay. So you all are going to try to do something here in New York? How soon you think you're going to?
Well, we don't have a date yet because we don't have a space yet. But we are working on that, and we will let you know.
Yeah. We may want to, Brittany, do something here for a small audience, perhaps, because we had that space next door and we had this space next door. So let's try to organize that. It was too soon to put all that together for this morning, but if you all don't mind, we want to have you back so we can have this conversation, and I think it's an important dialogue to have.
We would love that, and whenever possible, would love also to ensure that we can get all of us in a room together. It's hard being multi-state, but it's exciting.
Yeah, Rhiannon, we got to get you in New York, or we have to go where you. What city are you in Ohio?
Columbus.
Or we have to come to Columbus, one or the other. So, or both. Why not? Okay. Heather, Rhiannon, Sophie, so good to see you. Congratulations to all three of you.
Thank you.
Very pleased with what you've done. Very happy with what you've done. It was very moving and humbling for me to see, and as you said, for people to share their vulnerability. I was willing to even share some of mine. It just wasn't my convention to do it. I wasn't even supposed to speak. I think if Brittany had been there, that probably would not have happened. But no, we had just done a panel 2 weeks ago about mantles, about women's events where they have all male panels. And even though I wasn't all male, the only male on the panel, I felt kind of like, I don't think dudes should be on these. So when I got him spoken to lunch, I was like, y'all, I don't know if I'm really supposed to be here, but
you broke the rule.
Everybody was very welcoming and warm, and I appreciate that. And hopefully I won't be put in that position again. Heather, Sophie, and Rhiannon here with us. And those of you who are listening and watching, I hope you'll consider some of the things we've discussed and what it will take. All of us, and women in general, women of color, African American men. I was having a conversation with a male friend of mine over the weekend saying, Rhiannon, that black men are doing worse than black women. And I had to remind him, all of us, we can't get into the competition of who's the most oppressed. Like people do that, what was worse, slavery, the Holocaust? That's ridiculous. We're all a part of historically oppressed groups.
Yep.
And so we can get into a competition about who's been the most oppressed in many different ways. We all have had to deal with that, and it's important for those of us who are part of historically oppressed groups to work together. And that includes women. That includes white women in their own space as a historically exploited group. That's one of the things I did say in my remarks. It includes all women. It includes all people of color. So this is great work, and we'll be following up, folks. So keep it tuned right here. Follow these great ladies. You'll be hearing more about this. And those of you who didn't get a chance to participate today, a time will come, as I know many of you and our listeners who are very conscientious and are willing to be vulnerable, that a time will come when we'll be having this full-fledged conversation on the air. Okay?
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Good to see y'all. All right, folks. So we'll be back on the radio in a few minutes. This is MIP.